So it goes to show that America wasn't able to contain China. Instead, it accelerated China's technological independence. Hello everybody, my name is Toby. This of course is Toby's Takeaway. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about the rise of China, but I want to talk about it in terms of how it has happened and why it has sort of sped up over the last 10 years and why China should really be thanking America. Perhaps they weren't thinking that at the time, but it really has turned out that America has hastened the rise of China. In the past few weeks, two major announcements have sent shockwaves through the world of business and technology. First of all, Huawei, the company America, the United States of America, tried to cripple, announced new chips, signaling a breakthrough, a major breakthrough in technology. And just about the same time, a huge Chinese airline halted an order for American-made Boeing aircraft. Coincidence? Hardly. For over a decade, America has pursued a strategy of containment against China. Instead of partnering together and sharing in the success, America has tried to isolate, to block, and to slow down the rise of China, especially in high-tech industries. Now, that strategy, well, it's beginning or has been failing for a long time, but now the unintended consequences of that strategy are beginning to unfold. Take Huawei, banned from accessing American technology, so no Qualcomm chips, no Google services, no American suppliers. Many experts predicted the company's collapse, but Huawei had other plans. They turned inward and they focused on research and development. And the result? Well, just recently they announced their 5G chip-powered phone. And of course, it's made by the Chinese very own SMIC. So I think the market and the rest of the world realize, well, what have we got on our hands? We've now got an independent competitor to other big firms. And what happened when the news was announced, well, Nvidia's stock immediately fell. So not only is there an independent competitor out there, but one that doesn't rely on American technology and American suppliers. And the story doesn't just end with smartphones. Let's take the aviation industry. So China and pretty much the whole world were pretty reliant on either Boeing or Airbus for all their airplanes. But recently, especially with Boeing and their quality issues, their halt of production on some lines, and I think the 737 MAX plane had some issues. You can see about that in the news. What's interesting is at the same time as all that has been happening, China has come up with its own planes. That's right, something that people imagined was perhaps a dream has actually turned into a reality. So the Comac, I believe it's the 919 or 1919. Anyway, that plane, and I was actually on that recently, is now a reality. I flew from Chengdu to Beijing. It was a very, very smooth flight. So instead of buying American-made planes, now Chinese airlines are ordering their very own Chinese-made planes. Zoom out and the pattern becomes undeniable. SMIC is scaling up semiconductor manufacturing, creating chips under heavy restrictions. DJI, despite US attempts to restrict its sales, has become the undisputed global leader in drone technology. BYD, the electric vehicle company few took seriously a decade ago, is now outselling Tesla in China and expanding aggressively overseas. CATL, China's battery giant, dominates global EV battery supply chains. And in green energy, China leads the world in solar panel and wind turbine production. This wasn't inevitable, and in fact this is really what I want to talk about in today's video. There was another path. America could have chosen to partner with companies like Huawei instead of treating them as adversaries. So where trade, collaboration and codependency could have worked for mutual benefit, for prosperity for all, instead Washington took another path, another philosophy, that of zero zero-sum thinking, where in a way they imagined that the only way for America to win would be if China lost, and if China was winning, that meant America was losing. And for that reason, they pursued what has now turned out to be a real mistake, the policy of containment. For decades, globalization was built on a simple truth. Nations that work together, that trade together, that cooperate together were less likely to fight and more likely to prosper, to grow together. The idea was that mutual dependency was a feature, not a flaw, that cooperation was a strategy, not a confrontation. But over the past 10 years, that thinking has changed. America has decided, or did decide already, that dominance had to be preserved. So instead of working with companies like Huawei, like DJI, like SMIC, like BYD even, as co-investors, as developers, using America's strength and influence, economic influence of course, to guide these companies in the right directions, they decided that the best route was to block, was to blacklist, and was to sanction. Moving the camera a little bit this way, the sun is going to focus on everyone's eyes. I'm sorry about that. And what happened? Well, China was forced to adapt. They were forced to decouple from America. They had to re-engineer what they couldn't buy, and they couldn't find partners in America. So where did they go? Well, they were forced to look in other places, and a lot of them followed that Belt and Road Initiative that was started some 10, 15 years ago. Coincidence? Well, maybe, perhaps, or not. And so they have now partners in the Middle East, in Africa, Southeast Asia, in South America, all around the world, in fact, but less reliant on those American companies where they were so intertwined before. And what does that mean now for the American companies? Well, instead of having those working relationships with the companies in China, instead of perhaps being suppliers to those companies, well, those Chinese companies are no longer reliant on America, and instead they've become competitors. Already we are seeing the impact. American semiconductor exports to China are plummeting. Chinese companies are filling the gaps once occupied by Intel, Qualcomm and others. BYD and CATL are expanding aggressively in Europe, Latin America and even Australia. And Chinese-made drones, electric cars, green energy technologies are outcompeting US products globally. And of course, it's just the beginning. Nvidia, Intel, Qualcomm, all companies that were part of Chinese growth and profited from Chinese growth are now seeing less sales in the country. And Boeing, of course, once a major supplier to Chinese airlines, is seeing its sales plummet, whilst Chinese manufactured planes are seeing their sales rise. First of all in China, of course, but we could easily see Chinese made planes being sold around the world very, very soon. So it goes to show that America wasn't able to contain China. Instead, it accelerated China's technological independence. This is the consequence of zero-sum thinking. Instead of partnering with China and trying to influence from within, having a shared prosperity, instead, America has created a Chinese rival that no longer depends on America and will rival it around the world for contracts in other countries. Now, today, and mark this date very, very clearly, 2025, the two ecosystems have emerged. And it's very, very clear what they are now. It is a Western American-led system, previously led the whole world, but now I would say leads really only the West. And of course, there is China, the Chinese ecosystem, no longer reliant on America and a big player across the world, including South America and even Central America. And of course, America isn't happy about that being America's backyard. But that is what has happened. And I wanted to make this video today because although I'm pleased, and I genuinely am pleased for the rise in China, not only of the millions of people brought out of poverty that we've seen over the last 20 and 30 years, but a player on the world stage that is pushing technological advances, which I do believe will be great for the entire population of the world, not just for China. In conclusion, the era of unchallenged American hegemony, at least in the technology fields, is well and truly over, but not with a bang. It really is the consequences of their own policies. And I find it interesting and slightly ironic that the policies America used to try and contain China have in fact hastened the very thing they were scared of, which is China on the rise and powerful, not just, as I've already said, in those technological sectors, but in pretty much every industry around the world. And they've got America to thank for it. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. There's quite a lot of facts and figures I've sort of sprinkled in amongst there, but if you want more information, let me know in the comments. I can pass on some of the sources that I've used for this video. Also, please let me know if you have been involved, touched upon, used any of the innovations I've talked about, whether it be Huawei phones, Chinese made products, or perhaps you've even been on that COMAC flight like I have in China. It will be really interesting if those planes do start flying around the world and be used by other international airlines. Please let me know if you get a chance to go on a Chinese plane. Guys, thank you very much for watching. That's it. 谢谢，再见，拜拜。